In this tutorial, we're going to look at how we manage devices connected to the hub plugged into the host port on the iConnectMIDI4+. I've already connected several devices: an Arturia microbrute, a CME XKey25, a Korg MS-20 IC controller, and an Axiom Pro 61 keyboard. Each of these MIDI class-compliant USB devices shows up in the host jack section of the iConfig application. However, you'll notice that a couple of them occupy several of the virtual ports. This is because we have the setting for the maximum ports on the multi-port USB devices to 4 potential devices per USB port. This is probably undesirable if we want to make the maximum use of our available USB ports. So we'll reduce the maximum number of ports on USB devices to 1 and then reset the device. Now you can see that the ports are occupied only by one instance of the USB controller in question, leaving us with 4 free USB ports. The physical ports that the devices are plugged into do not necessarily correspond to the virtual ports, but we might want to keep those set every time we use the device. So we'll reserve the port names that we wish to use each time for the virtual ports so that they map on to the physical devices in a known manner each time. If we look at the port routing, however, we note that the names don't correspond to the devices, which makes it difficult to route. So we'll go back and we'll change the entries for the name to some aliases that we can easily identify when we go back and do port routing. We'll set a name for each of the devices in turn, and that will then show up in the port routing section when we want to connect the devices to the various other ports that we want to route the MIDI information to. Let's have a look at what that looks like now when we go back to the port routing section. We can see these names are easily identifiable in the USB host jack section of the port routing. Now if we look at, say, the XKey25, we see that it's connected to device jack 3 port 2. But we may want to route it specifically to the first iPad and the MS-20 IC controller to the second iPad. That's easily achieved using iConfig and is creating a direct connection via the iConnectMIDI4+ between the devices and the iPads. Now I'm going to hook up an Alesis eDrum set to the USB hub connected to the host port jack. We'll see how that affects the iConfig settings. Because we reserved the names for the existing devices, our eDrum set is added at the bottom of the list no matter what port it's physically connected to on the hub. We'll also reserve this device, and we'll change its name in the alias section so that we can easily identify it in the port routing. Here you can see that it shows up as we expect. Now our Axiom Pro 61 keyboard is a large keyboard that can be used to control multiple synthesizers. It's preferable to perhaps using the built-in keyboards on an iPad, and so what we'll do is we'll connect it to the 2 iPads directly so that we can play a full-range keyboard if we need to. We can also connect it to the various devices, for example, the devices we have connected on DIN ports if we have devices synthesizers connected there. And also, because I have the microbrute connected on the USB host port, I'm going to send it there as well. Now we have the Axiom Pro 61 able to send to multiple devices via routing inside iConfig through the iConnectMIDI4+.